I was standing outside my own home, shivering in the freezing rain while my son celebrated his birthday inside with his wife and mother-in-law. Through the window, I watched them laughing and opening gifts as if I didn't exist until a luxury car pulled up in front of the house. It was my mother, a woman who I thought lived a simple life on a ranch in the countryside. When she stepped out of the car and saw me in that state, her eyes filled with fury. She pointed at the house and said just one word: destroy. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. I never imagined the day would come when my own son would leave me outside the house. But that is exactly what happened on the night of his birthday, under a downpour that seemed endless. My name is Sarah. I am 53 years old, and I have dedicated my entire life to being a good mother. I raised my son Richard all alone after my husband abandoned us when the boy was barely 5 years old. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to ensure he had everything: quality education, decent clothes, food on the table. I sold the jewelry I inherited from my grandmother to pay for his college tuition. I gave up my dreams so he could achieve his, and he did. Richard graduated in business administration, got a great job, married Ashley, a woman from an old money family, and built a comfortable life. When he invited me to live with them in their new house in an exclusive gated community, I accepted without thinking twice. After all, he was my son. I thought we could finally have a peaceful life together after so many years of struggle. But the reality was very different from what I imagined. From the first day, I realized that Ashley did not enjoy my presence. She had a way of wrinkling her nose when I entered the living room as if I brought a bad smell with me. She made comments about my simple clothes, about the way I spoke about everything. And the worst part was that Richard never defended me. He pretended he didn't hear, looked away, or changed the subject. Richard's mother-in-law, Bertha, was even worse. A pompous woman covered in expensive jewelry and designer clothes who treated me as if I were the housemaid. She was always there, interfering in everything, giving her opinions, emphasizing that she had money and I had nothing. Little by little, I was pushed into a corner of the house. My room was in the back near the laundry area. I woke up early to make breakfast, cleaned the house, did the laundry, and cooked. Ashley never thanked me. Richard barely spoke to me. I became invisible in my own family. Richard's birthday party was the breaking point. I spent weeks planning every detail. I wanted it to be special. I wanted to see my son happy. I ordered a 3-tier cake. I prepared snacks. I decorated the living room with balloons and streamers. I used the little money I had saved to buy him a gift, a watch he had mentioned he would like to have. On the day of the party, I woke up at 5 in the morning to start the preparations. My back hurt, my legs were throbbing, but I didn't care. It was for my son. When the first guests started arriving at 7 in the evening, everything was perfect. But right from the start, something was wrong. Richard greeted me with a quick, almost dismissive gesture and went back to talking with his friends. Ashley circulated through the party in an incredibly expensive dress, all dolled up receiving compliments. Bertha was by her side, equally elegant, introducing her daughter-in-law to everyone as if she were a star. And me, I was there, serving drinks, collecting empty glasses, carrying trays of appetizers. No one introduced me as the birthday boy's mother. No one thanked me for the work. I was treated exactly like a staff member hired for the event. I tried to approach Richard at one point to give him my gift, but he was so engrossed in a conversation with his business partners that he barely looked at me. He just muttered, "Not now." Mom turned his back on me. The pain I felt in that moment was physical, as if someone had stabbed a knife into my chest and twisted it slowly. That was when Bertha approached me in the kitchen. I was washing some dishes when she walked in with that fake smile that always gave me chills. "Sarah," she said with a tone of voice that pretended to be kind but was pure poison. "Don't you think you are a little out of place here at the party? I mean, look at yourself. Those old clothes, that simple manner. You are embarrassing Richard in front of his friends." I swallowed hard, feeling the tears burning my eyes, but I was not going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "I am his mother," I replied, my voice trembling. "I have every right to be here." Mother Bertha let out a cruel little laugh. "Honey, you were useful when Richard was a child and needed someone to take care of him, but now he has a real wife, a real family. You are just a burden, an inconvenient reminder of his poor past." Every word was like a slap in the face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to defend myself, but my voice was gone. I stood there holding a wet plate while that woman destroyed what was left of my dignity. If I were you, she continued adjusting the pearl necklace around her neck, I would disappear from this party. I would let the real people celebrate in peace. She left the kitchen with firm steps, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and malice. I stood there for a few minutes shaking, not from cold but from rage and sadness. How had it come to this point? How did my son, whom I loved more than anything in the world, allow them to treat me like this? I took a deep breath and decided I needed to talk to Richard. I needed to look him in the eye and ask him when I stopped being important, when my love and sacrifice stopped being worth anything. I left the kitchen and went to the living room. The party was in full swing. People were laughing, drinking, having fun. The music was loud. Richard was near the gift table opening packages with Ashley by his side. Bertha watched them with pride, as if she were the true matriarch of the family. I walked toward them with my heart hammering in my chest. "Richard," I called out, but my voice was drowned out by the music and conversations. I tried again, louder. "Richard, I need to talk to you." He finally looked at me, and for a second I saw irritation on his face. Irritation, as if I were a nuisance, an unwanted interruption. "Mom, I'm busy right now," he said, without even trying to hide his impatience. "But it is important," I insisted, feeling that people around us were starting to watch. Later, he cut me off and turned his attention back to the gifts. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. I couldn't take it anymore. All the humiliations, all the disrespect, all the accumulated pain exploded suddenly. "No," I said loudly, causing several people to turn around. "It is not going to be later. I need to talk to you now." Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. The music was still playing, but all conversation ceased. Everyone was looking at us. Richard turned red with rage. "Mom, you are making a scene," he hissed through his teeth. "I am making a scene," I repeated, feeling the tears finally flowing. "I spent my entire life sacrificing for you. I worked my fingers to the bone to give you everything. And now you treat me as if I were nothing, as if I didn't exist." Ashley approached, her face twisted with disgust. "How embarrassing," she muttered. "At my husband's party." "Your husband is my son," I screamed, losing control completely. "I raised him alone. I sold everything I had so he could study, and you people treat me like trash." Bertha stepped forward with her eyes shining with rage. "How dare you speak to my daughter like that? You are a rude woman with no class. Richard, do something." And that was when the unthinkable happened. Richard grabbed my arm with force, so much force that it hurt. He dragged me toward the door, ignoring my protests, ignoring the fact that people were watching in horror. "You ruined my party," he said with a cold voice I had never heard before. "You ruined everything with your drama, with your neediness, with your complaints." Richard let go of me, I begged, trying to free myself. But he continued dragging me to the front door. Outside, the rain was falling hard, a violent storm that pounded on the roof. "You have to leave," he said, opening the door. "What?" "It is raining," I pointed out in disbelief. "I don't care. You are ruining my night. Get out and only come back when you learn how to behave." Before I could process what was happening, he pushed me outside. I stumbled, almost falling onto the wet porch. "Richard, for God's sake," I screamed. But he just looked at me with those cold eyes, without a trace of the boy I had raised, the son I loved. "You were always a burden," he said with terrifying calm. "Always. I built my life in spite of you, not because of you. And now I finally have a real family. A family that respects me. That has value." And then he slammed the door in my face. I heard the key turn in the lock. I stood there paralyzed while the rain started to soak me. I couldn't believe what had just happened. My son had kicked me out of the house, in the rain, as if I were an unwanted animal. The rain fell with a violence that seemed to have a purpose, as if the sky were crying for me. In seconds, my simple clothes were soaked, sticking to my body. The cold penetrated my skin and reached my bones. I started to shake uncontrollably. I pounded on the door with my fists screaming my son's name. "Richard!" "Richard, let me in. It is freezing. Please." But there was no answer, only the sound of the rain and in the distance the murmur of the party continuing inside, as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist. I continued knocking weaker and weaker until my hands started to hurt. The tears mixed with the rainwater on my face. I couldn't tell one from the other. Eventually, I gave up on the door. My feet were numb inside my soaked shoes. I staggered to the side of the house where there was a large living room window, the window through which I could see everything, and what I saw tore me to pieces. The party continued as if I had never been there. The music had started playing again. People were laughing again, talking, drinking. Richard was in the center of the room, smiling broadly, receiving congratulations and hugs. Ashley was glued to him, beautiful and elegant. The perfect wife. Bertha circulated among the guests, distributing smiles and animated conversation. No one mentioned what had just happened. No one seemed uncomfortable with the fact that the birthday boy's mother had been expelled into the rain. I pressed my frozen hands against the window glass, watching that scene as if I were a ghost, looking at the world of the living. I was there a few yards away, but I might as well have been millions of miles away. I was invisible, disposable. I saw when they brought out the cake. That beautiful cake I had ordered, which had cost almost all the money I had saved. Richard and Ashley held the knife together and cut the first slice while everyone applauded. The way they looked at each other, the intimacy, the complicity, it was as if I had never existed in his life. Bertha took a piece of cake and offered it to Richard with a maternal smile, the smile that should have been mine, the role that should have been mine. I felt my throat close up. My body was shaking so much I could barely stay standing. The cold was terrible, piercing. My lips must have been purple. My hands were so frozen I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. How long did I stay there? I don't know. It could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. Time lost its meaning. Only the cold existed, the rain, and that torturous vision through the window. At some point my legs gave out. I collapsed on the wet ground of the garden, sitting in a puddle of mud and rainwater. I no longer had the strength to stand up. I didn't have the strength for anything. Memories flooded my mind. Richard as a baby crying in the middle of the night, and me rocking him until he fell asleep, even though I was exhausted after a double shift at work. Richard as a child falling off his bike, and me running to comfort him, cleaning his scraped knees with so much care. Richard as a teenager, when he was accepted into college, and we jumped up and down hugging in the living room of that tiny apartment where we lived. Where did it all go wrong? At what moment did my son turn into this cold and cruel stranger? The rain continued relentlessly. Now I was coughing, feeling my chest tighten. The cold was hurting me. I knew it, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by pain, by humiliation, by betrayal. Through the fogged window, I saw Richard opening gifts. Expensive packages wrapped in beautiful paper with elaborate bows. He smiled for each one. He thanked them effusively. Where was my gift? The watch I had bought. Probably thrown in some corner, ignored, just like me. People at the party started to dance. The room filled with movement, with life, with joy. And me out there sitting in the mud, dying of cold, being forgotten. Did anyone in there even think about me? Did any of the guests wonder where the birthday boy's mother was? Or did they all simply accept the narrative that Ashley and Bertha certainly spread, that I was a problem? An inconvenient relative who caused a scene and had to be removed? I closed my eyes, wishing to disappear, wishing the earth would open up and swallow me, take me out of that unbearable pain. That was when I heard a different sound, the roar of an engine, smooth and powerful. I opened my eyes with difficulty, my vision blurred by the rain and tears. A car was entering slowly from the street. It wasn't just any car, it was huge black, gleaming even under the rain. A car of the kind you only see in movies or in neighborhoods where rich people live. The car stopped right in front of the house. I stayed watching, confused, not understanding what was happening. Who could it be? Another wealthy guest for the party. The driver's door opened and a man in a dark suit stepped out holding a large umbrella. He walked hurriedly to the rear door of the car and opened it respectfully. And then she stepped out. Even through the curtain of rain, I recognized her immediately. My mother. But not the mother I knew, not the simple woman who lived on a ranch in the countryside planting vegetables and raising chickens. This woman was wearing an incredibly expensive designer coat, elegant shoes, and carried a handbag that probably cost more than a regular car. She moved with an authority, a presence I had never seen in her before. Her face, when the streetlight illuminated it, was marked by age, but her eyes shone with a terrifying intensity. She saw me immediately, me sitting in the mud, soaked, shivering, destroyed. My mother's face transformed. The rage I saw in those eyes made my blood run colder than the weather already had. She walked toward me with quick steps, the chauffeur holding the umbrella over her. When she got close, she knelt in the mud, not caring about her expensive clothes, and held my face in her hands. Sarah. Her voice trembled with contained emotion. My daughter? What did they do to you? I couldn't answer. I could only cry harder. She pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time in hours, I felt a little warmth, the warmth of a mother's love. That unconditional love I had given to my son and that he had thrown away like trash. My mother pulled away and stared at the living room window. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the party happening inside, people laughing. My son happy and carefree while his mother was dying of cold outside. She stood up slowly, helping me to my feet. She took off her expensive coat and placed it over my shoulders. The chauffeur appeared by my side, supporting me gently. My mother then turned toward the car. Two large men, clearly bodyguards, stepped out of a second vehicle I hadn't even noticed had arrived. They approached her, waiting for orders. She looked one more time at the house at that window where my son celebrated, oblivious to the suffering he had caused. Her hand gripped the expensive cane she was holding, a cane I had never seen her use before. And then, with a low voice but loaded with absolute authority, my mother said a single word: destroy. The bodyguards nodded and started walking toward the front door. I looked at my mother, confused, still shivering, still trying to process everything that was happening. Mom, what? Who are you? She looked at me with a tenderness that contrasted completely with the fury in her eyes moments ago. I am someone who should never have allowed you to suffer like this. She replied softly, I am someone who made the mistake of thinking that keeping my distance would protect you. But I was wrong, my daughter. So wrong. Before I could ask anything else, the bodyguards reached the front door. One of them didn't knock. He simply kicked the door with so much force that it flew open, tearing pieces of the frame with it. The sound echoed through the rainy night, and through the window I saw the exact moment the party stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. The music stopped abruptly, cut off, as if someone had pulled the plug. Conversations ceased. I heard the clink of a glass hitting the floor and shattering. Through the window, I saw every face turn toward the open door. The look of shock was universal. Mouths open, eyes wide, bodies paralyzed. The two bodyguards entered the house with firm, determined steps. They were large, imposing men dressed in dark suits that looked like military uniforms. Their faces showed no emotion whatsoever. They were professionals executing a task. Richard was the first to react. I saw when he stepped forward his face red with rage and confusion. "Who are you?" he shouted, though his voice trembled. "Get out of my house right now. I am going to call the police." The bodyguards ignored him completely. It was as if he were invisible. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, creating a corridor, and stood there at attention. That was when my mother walked in. She walked slowly with the help of the cane, but every step resonated with authority. The chauffeur followed her holding the umbrella, and I was by her side, still shivering, still wrapped in her coat, being supported by another bodyguard. When we entered the living room, all eyes turned to us. I must have looked like a ghost, pale, soaked, clothes sticking to my body and mud up to my knees. My mother, on the other hand, looked like a queen entering her palace. Richard looked at me, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something that might have been guilt or concern pass over his face, but it disappeared so fast I could have imagined it. "What is this?" he asked, still trying to maintain an air of authority, although his voice faltered. "Mom, what did you do? Who are these people?" My mother didn't answer him. Her eyes swept the room, examining every person present, every detail of the expensive decor, every symbol of wealth and success. Ashley was practically glued to Richard, her face pale. Bertha had stepped forward, hands on her hips, trying to look intimidating, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "Excuse me?" Bertha spoke with that arrogant tone she always used. "Who do you think you are to invade this house? Get out immediately, or I will call the police myself." My mother finally looked at her. It was an icy stare that made Bertha step back half a pace involuntarily. "The police?" my mother repeated with a tone that was almost amused. "Please feel free." She made a gesture, and one of the bodyguards handed a cell phone to Bertha. "You can call right now. Ask the commissioner which side he prefers to be on." There was something in my mother's voice, an absolute certainty that made Bertha swallow hard and not take the phone. Richard tried another strategy. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this is a misunderstanding. My mother caused a scene at my party, and I just asked her to calm down outside. Calm down." My mother interrupted him, and her voice was loaded with poison. "You locked your mother outside during a storm, the woman who raised you alone, who sold everything she had to pay for your education, who worked her fingers to the bone to give you a decent life, and you locked her in the rain like she was a stray dog." Richard went pale. "How do you know that I know everything my mother cut him off? I know every sacrifice my daughter made for you. I know every tear she shed, and I know exactly how much you are worth, which is nothing." She struck the cane on the floor, and the sound echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. "My name is Margaret Sanders," she announced, and I saw several faces pale as they recognized the name. "And this house, this car in the garage, this job you have," she pointed to Richard, "everything belongs to me." Richard staggered as if he had been punched. What are you saying?" My mother signaled, and the chauffeur handed her a leather briefcase. She opened it and took out several documents. "Do you think you achieved all this alone?" she asked with a bitter smile. "Do you think a fresh graduate simply gets a manager position at a multinational company, that he gets a loan approved for a house of this size with no credit history?" She threw the papers on the coffee table. "I invested in you, for my daughter, because I wanted to see her happy. I put my money, my contacts, my influence to build your life. Every step you climbed was because I opened the doors, and you used all of that to humiliate the woman who loved you most in this world." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear people's heavy breathing. Richard picked up the documents with shaking hands. His eyes raced across the pages, opening wider and wider. "This cannot be true," he muttered. "I earned everything with my effort, your effort." My mother let out a humorless laugh. "You were mediocre your whole life. Your grades were bad. Your performance at work is merely satisfactory. The only reason you haven't been fired yet is because I personally guaranteed your position, and I paid your mortgage when you missed payments 3 times last year." Ashley, who had been quiet until then, let out a sharp scream. "It's a lie, Richard, she is lying." But Richard was looking at the documents, and the truth was written there, undeniable. "She is telling the truth," he whispered, looking like he was in shock. "My God, it is all true." Bertha tried to regain control of the situation. "Even if that is true," she said with a shrill voice, "what do you want, money? How much we can pay?" "Pay," my mother repeated, and her eyes shone dangerously. "Do you think this is about money?" She turned to the bodyguards. "Start." And then it all happened very fast. The bodyguards moved with military efficiency. They were not violent with people, but they were relentless with objects. The gift table was overturned, sending expensive packages crashing and scattering across the floor. The 3-tier cake, that beautiful cake I had ordered, was shoved off the table and smashed onto the floor in an explosion of cream and dough. People screamed and ran to the walls, trying to get out of the bodyguard's way. Ashley was crying hysterically. Bertha tried to intervene and was gently but firmly pushed aside. The expensive paintings on the walls were ripped down. Crystal vases were knocked over. Curtains were pulled from the windows. The expensive sound system was unplugged and thrown to the floor with a crash. "Stop!" Richard shouted, trying to stop the bodyguards. But it was like trying to stop a moving train. "Stop this. This is my house." "No," said my mother calmly. "It is not." She made another signal, and more people entered through the door. Lawyers, it seemed, carrying more briefcases and documents. "This property is registered to a holding company of which you are only a temporary beneficiary," one of the lawyers explained in a monotone professional voice. "Mrs. Margaret Sanders is the majority owner and has full rights to rescind the agreement at any time, especially in cases of breach of contract." What breach of contract? Richard was desperate now. The clause requiring dignified and respectful treatment of family members, the lawyer replied, consulting the documents. "Specifically, Mrs. Sarah Sanders, your mother." Richard's jaw dropped. But I didn't know that. I never read that contract. I didn't even know my grandmother was involved." "Ignorance is no excuse," my mother said coldly. "You signed, and you broke the terms." The guests started to flee. One by one, they escaped through the door, murmuring apologies without looking back. No one wanted to stay near what was turning into a total disaster. Ashley grabbed Richard's arm. "Do something," she screamed. "Are you going to let them destroy everything?" But Richard was paralyzed, looking at the destruction around him, the documents in his hands, at my mother standing there like an avenging goddess. And then his eyes met mine. I was still there, shivering, wet, destroyed. But something had changed. I was no longer alone. I was no longer the invisible woman who could be discarded without consequences. Mom said Richard, and for the first time that night his voice had real emotion. Fear. Regret. Maybe. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand. "Now you know," I replied, and my voice came out firmer than I expected. "Now you know what it is like to be outside, what it is like to be treated like nothing." Tears began to stream down his face. "Please, please forgive me. I was an idiot, I know, but I am your son. You can't abandon me like this." The words hit me like knives, because he was right. He was my son, and despite everything, despite all the pain, all the humiliation, a part of me still loved him. But my mother didn't have those emotional attachments. "Sarah isn't going to abandon you," she said, "but I am going to teach you a lesson you apparently never learned. Actions have consequences." She turned to the lawyers. "Execute the documents. I want this family off this property in 1 hour. Complete chaos. That is the only way to describe what happened in the following minutes. Ashley collapsed, falling to her knees on the floor and sobbing uncontrollably. Bertha was screaming at the lawyers, threatening lawsuits, career destruction, everything her mind could formulate. Richard simply stood there, staring at nothing, as if his brain had shut down in the face of the impossibility of processing such a reversal. The bodyguards continued their methodical work. Everything that represented luxury, comfort, ostentation, everything was systematically removed or disabled. The expensive lamps were turned off. The electronics were unplugged. Even the designer clothes that were in the master closet started being packed into black bags. "You have 1 hour," one of the lawyers repeated, looking at the expensive watch on his wrist. "After that time, anyone still on the property will be considered a trespasser and treated as such." Ashley finally stood up, her face stained with makeup and tears. "This is insane," she screamed, pointing at my mother. "You can't just kick us out like this. We have rights. I am going to call my dad. He knows important people. He is going to—" "Your father," my mother interrupted her, and there was a touch of cruel amusement in her voice. "You mean Mr. Albert Mendez, who owes $3 million to the bank where I am the majority shareholder. Please call him. I am sure he will be delighted to know that his daughter wants to complicate his situation even further." Ashley went completely pale. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Bertha tried one last play. "We are going to a hotel," she announced, trying to regain some dignity. "A 5-star hotel. And tomorrow we are going to consult our own lawyers and resolve this." "With what money?" asked my mother calmly. Richard's bank accounts were frozen by court order about— She looked at her watch. 15 minutes ago. Unauthorized debits, misuse of corporate funds, several irregularities my auditors found in the last few months. Richard finally reacted. "What irregularities? I never did anything illegal." One of the lawyers stepped forward, opening another file. Personal expenses charged to corporate cards, leisure trips declared as business, hiring overpriced vendors in exchange for kickbacks. Should I continue, but that wasn't me," Richard stuttered. "That was— Everyone does that. It is normal in the corporate world." "Normal does not mean legal," the lawyer replied coldly. "And your position was conditional on impeccable ethical behavior. You failed." I watched all of that in silence, still shivering from the cold, but starting to feel something different. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like justice, as if the universe had finally rebalanced itself. Richard turned to me again, desperate. "Mom, make it stop. You still have power over her. She is your mother. Please, I will change, I promise. I will treat you better. I will—" "Enough," I said, and my voice came out firm, clear, without any tremor. "Enough, Richard." He looked at me with the eyes of an abandoned dog, but I no longer felt pity. "You had years to treat me well," I continued. "Years where I served you, loved you, did everything for you, and you treated me like trash. You let your wife and mother-in-law humiliate me. You kicked me out of the house in the rain. You chose. But I didn't know Grandma was rich." He exploded and immediately realized the mistake. The silence that followed was devastating. "So that is it," I said softly. "You aren't sorry for treating me badly. You are sorry for losing the money you didn't even know existed." He tried to defend himself, but the words died in his throat. Because it was true, and everyone there knew it. My mother put her hand on my shoulder gently. "Let's go, Sarah. You need medical care, dry clothes, and rest. This place," she looked around with disdain. "This place is no longer your problem." "Where are we going?" I asked, still processing everything. "Home," she replied simply. "To your real home." We started walking toward the door. The bodyguards immediately positioned themselves around us, creating a human shield. Richard tried to follow me, but was blocked. "Mom," he shouted, "don't abandon me. I am your son, your only son." I stopped. I didn't turn around, but I stopped. You stopped being my son the moment you locked me outside, I said with my voice trembling but firm. A son doesn't do that to his mother. A son doesn't choose a comfortable life at the expense of the suffering of the one who raised him. But I love you, he cried. I finally turned to look at him. He was on his knees, on the floor, amidst the wreckage of the party, surrounded by legal papers and broken objects. He looked small, pathetic. No, I said. You love the idea of having a mother to serve you. You love having someone to blame when things go wrong. But you never truly loved me. Because love doesn't treat people like that. Ashley was clinging to Bertha, both crying. The mother-in-law, who had been so arrogant, so cruel, now looked like a frightened, lost old woman. Aunt Sarah Ashley sobbed, using a term she had never used before. Please have mercy. We have nowhere to go. I could have felt pity. Years ago, I would have. But not now. Not after everything. You have 50 minutes, I said, looking at the clock on the wall. I suggest you start packing. We left the house while they were still there, paralyzed by shock. The chauffeur was waiting for us with the umbrella. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, but it was still cold. My mother helped me into the car. The interior was luxurious with heated leather seats and a soft smell of expensive perfume. She took a soft blanket and covered me carefully. Rest, she said gently. We still have a lot to talk about, but right now you need to recover. I rested my head on the seat and closed my eyes. I could hear my mother giving instructions over the phone. Doctor on call, new clothes, hot tea prepared at home, her home, my new home. As the car drove away, I couldn't resist and looked out the rear window. I saw the house all lit up with people going in and out carrying things. I saw Richard still at the door watching the car leave his face wet. I don't know if from rain or tears, and I felt nothing. The cord had been cut, finally. The trip to my mother's house took about 40 minutes. I fell asleep halfway there, exhausted emotionally and physically. When I woke up, we were passing through a huge gate with bodyguards and cameras everywhere. The property was gigantic, immense gardens illuminated even at night, a long driveway flanked by ancient trees, and at the end a mansion that looked like it came out of a movie, 3 stories of classic architecture with wide balconies and lit windows. "This is where you live?" I asked, stunned. My mother smiled, but there was sadness in the smile. "It is where I have always lived, Sarah. The ranch in the countryside is real, it exists, but it is just one of the places. This is my main home in the most exclusive part of the city. Why did you never tell me? Why did you pretend to be poor all these years?" She sighed deeply. "Because your father met me when I was already rich, and he used me. He married me for the money, not for love. When I realized I was pregnant with you, he tried to blackmail me, threatened to kidnap you if I didn't give him half the fortune." I looked at her in shock. "I didn't know." "Because I protected you," she continued. "I made a deal with him. He would stay away in exchange for monthly payments. And I raised you, making you believe we were simple, so you would grow up without attracting attention, without being a target. When you grew up and chose to have a simple life, to marry a simple man, to have a son, I thought I had made the right decision, that you would be happy like that. But did you always know what was happening?" "Not always," she admitted. "You pulled away when Richard was born. You said you wanted to do it all alone, prove you could. I respected that, but I kept people watching from a distance. And in recent years, when I found out how that ungrateful boy treated you," her eyes flashed with rage, "I wanted to intervene. But you are proud like me. You wouldn't accept help. So you waited until it was unbearable," she finished. "Until he crossed the line of what is acceptable, and he crossed it tonight." The car stopped in front of the mansion. The door opened and a crowd of staff was waiting for us. Housekeeper maids, a doctor with a briefcase, all in impeccable uniforms. The next few hours passed in a haze. I was taken to a huge room with a bed the size of a small living room. They gave me dry, soft, expensive clothes. The doctor examined me, diagnosed mild hypothermia and severe stress, gave me medicine, and recommended rest. I took a hot bath, the longest of my life, letting the hot water wash away not only the dirt, but also a bit of the pain. When I came out, there was food waiting. Hot soup, fresh bread tea with honey. I ate slowly, savoring every spoonful, every sip. My mother appeared when I finished, now dressed in comfortable loungewear. "How do you feel?" confused, I admitted. "It is all very much." "I know." She sat on the edge of the bed. "It is going to take time to process. But Sarah, you need to understand one thing. None of this was your fault. You were an exceptional mother. What Richard became was his choice. But I failed somewhere. I insisted, feeling the tears returning. If I had raised him better, if I had— "No," she interrupted me firmly. "You gave love, dedication, sacrifice. What more can a mother give if he chose to be ungrateful, greedy, cruel? That reflects his character, not yours. What is going to happen to him now?" My mother got serious. He is going to learn to live without privileges he never deserved. The company has already fired him. The house is being sold. The accounts are being audited. He will have to rebuild his life from scratch with his own hands like you did. And Bertha Ashley, already called her father, who apparently had a monumental fit of rage upon learning that his daughter ruined any chance of negotiating his debt. Bertha well. She will have to find out what it is like to depend on the kindness of others. I stayed silent for a moment. "It seems cruel." "It is fair," my mother corrected. "There is a difference." She hugged me, and for the first time in decades I felt truly safe. "Rest now," she whispered. "Tomorrow we start a new chapter." And that was what I did. I sank into that incredibly comfortable mattress covered by sheets with a thread count I didn't even know existed. And I slept. I slept without dreams, without nightmares, without interruptions. For the first time in years, I slept in peace. I woke up with the sun streaming through the huge bedroom window. For a few seconds, I was disoriented, not recognizing where I was. Then everything came back. The party, the rain, my mother, the destruction. I sat up in bed slowly, expecting to feel pain or regret. But what I felt was relief, a deep and liberating relief. There was a breakfast tray waiting on a side table, fresh bread, fruits, juices, aromatic coffee. A handwritten note said, "Eat calmly. I will meet you in the garden when you are ready." Mom. I ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was amazing how simple food could taste so good when you didn't have to prepare it all with your own hands while being criticized. After coffee, I found new clothes in the closet. Elegant but comfortable. They fit me perfectly. My mother must have guessed my size or sent someone to buy them during the night. When I went downstairs, a gentle maid guided me to the garden. It was even more impressive in the daylight. Flowers of all colors, ornamental fountains, ancient trees. And in the center, sitting at a wrought iron table under a parasol, was my mother. "Good morning, dear." She smiled when she saw me. "Did you sleep well, better than in years?" I admitted, sitting next to her. She poured tea for both of us. "We need to talk about the future," she said, getting straight to the point. "About your future." "My future," I repeated. "I can barely think about the present." "I know. But Sarah, you spent decades living for other people. First for Richard, then for that ungrateful family. Now it is time to live for yourself." "I don't even know where to start," I confessed. She took my hand. "Start by letting me help. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because you are my daughter and I love you, and because you deserve it." In the following days, my life changed completely. My mother wasn't joking about helping me rebuild. She brought in psychologists to help me process the trauma, nutritionists to help recover my health, even an image consultant who, with much care and respect, helped me develop a style of my own. But the most important thing was the education. My mother started teaching me about her businesses, properties, investments, companies. At first it was overwhelming. I was just a housewife. What could I understand about the corporate world? But my mother was patient, and I discovered I was smarter than I thought. Decades managing a tight budget, making money stretch, negotiating with vendors, all that had given me valuable skills. You were always an executive, my mother said once. You just never had the right resources. 3 weeks after that fateful night, I received a letter. It was from Richard, handwritten on common paper with shaky handwriting. My mother was with me when I opened it. Mom. I don't even know how to start this letter. Sorry seems so inadequate for what I did, but it is all I have. You were right about everything. I was the worst human being I could have been. I treated you like trash when you deserved to be treated like a queen. These last few days have been the hardest of my life. Ashley left me. She is back with her parents and apparently is already seeing someone else. Bertha blames me for everything and barely speaks to me. I am living in a tiny rented room working as a delivery driver to pay rent. But you know something, I think I deserved it. Every second of this misery, I deserved it. Because now I know how you felt. All that rain, all that cold, all that loneliness, I understand it now. And it breaks my heart to know that I was the one who made you feel that way. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't expect you to forgive me, because I wouldn't forgive myself in your place. I am writing just to say I am so sorry, and that you were always an incredible mother. The problem was always me. I hope you are happy. Truly. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Your son, if you still consider me that, Richard. I finished reading with tears in my eyes. My mother waited in silence. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to run to him, help him, because even after everything, he is still my son. But another part knows he needs to learn the lesson my mother completed. Sarah, you can love him and still let him face the consequences of his actions. One thing does not cancel out the other. Do you think he truly changed? I think he is starting to change, she said carefully. But real change takes time. A pretty letter doesn't erase years of terrible behavior. I put the letter away. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready yet. More weeks passed. My transformation continued. It wasn't just physical, although that had definitely changed. It was mental, emotional, spiritual. I was turning into someone I didn't know. Someone strong, confident, capable. My mother started including me in business meetings. At first I just watched learning. But eventually I started giving opinions, and people listened. Not because I was the boss's daughter, but because my ideas made sense. You have a natural talent for this, one of the executives told me after a particularly successful meeting. Have you considered working with us permanently? I hadn't, but now I was considering it. 2 months after that night, I received another letter from Richard. This time it was shorter. Mom, I got a better job. Nothing fantastic, but it is honest. I am saving money. I started therapy too. The psychologist says I have a lot of work ahead of me. I don't expect an answer. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better, not for the money, not to impress you, for myself, because I realized I didn't like the person I had become. With love, Richard. This time I replied, a short neutral letter wishing him good luck on his journey, but making it clear that reconciliation was not on the table at that moment. It was my mother who suggested the next step. You should know the companies, she said, not just reports and numbers. The real people, the real places. And that was how I started visiting the various properties and businesses my mother controlled. Factories, offices, stores. I talked to managers, to employees, to customers, and I discovered I was good at it. Really good. People responded to me. Maybe because I had spent so many years at the bottom, I knew how to speak their language. I knew how to truly listen. I knew when something was wrong, even when the numbers said otherwise. You have empathy, my mother explained. It is a rare quality in the business world and incredibly valuable. 3 months later, she made me a proposal. I want you to take over one of the companies, she said bluntly. Not as a favor, Not out of nepotism, but because you earned it. You proved you have capacity. I was in disbelief, but I barely have experience. You have 40 years of real-life experience, she corrected, in solving problems with limited resources and managing crises, in persisting when everything is against you. That is worth more than any MBA. And that was how I became the general director, the CEO of one of the group's subsidiaries, a medium-sized company, nothing gigantic, but profitable and stable. A good place to start. The first few months were challenging. I made mistakes, many mistakes, but I learned from each one. And slowly the company started to grow under my leadership. Not by magic, but by hard work, by listening to the right people, by making difficult decisions when necessary, by genuinely caring about the result. 1 year after that rainy night, I was a completely different woman. Not only in appearance, although that had definitely changed, but in essence. I had found my purpose, my strength, my voice. And it was exactly 1 year later that I received an unexpected call. The number was unknown, but something made me answer. "Hello, Mom." Richard's voice was hoarse, nervous. "I know I have no right to call, but I need to see you just once, please." I stayed silent for a long moment. Why? Because I need to look you in the eye and apologize for real. Not by letter, not by phone. Personally. You don't have to forgive me. Just give me that chance. I looked out my office window. Yes, my office. Overlooking the city with my plaque on the door. I thought about everything that had happened in this last year. How much I had grown, changed, evolved. "I will think about it," I finally replied. "That is all I can ask," he said, and there were tears in his voice. "Thank you for answering." I hung up and stared at the phone for several minutes. That night, I talked to my mother about the call. "What does your heart tell you?" she asked. "That I want to see if the change is real," I admitted. "But I am afraid of being fooled again, of being the fool who always goes back." "You are not a fool," my mother said firmly, "and you are not the same woman from a year ago. If you decide to see him, it will be on your terms, in your territory, with your boundaries. He no longer has power over you." She was right, and that realization was liberating. 2 days later, I scheduled a meeting. Not at the mansion, not in some public place. At the office. I wanted him to see me in my element in the world I had built for myself. When Richard entered the conference room, I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight, looked older, more tired. His clothes were simple but clean. There was no longer any trace of the arrogant and successful man who had kicked me out that night. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes widening. "Mom, you look incredible." I was, dressed in a tailored suit, hair professionally done makeup, discreet but flawless. I was the image of success and power. "Sit down." I pointed to a chair on the other side of the table. He sat down nervous, his hands trembling slightly. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. We just looked at each other, measuring, evaluating. "You said you wanted to apologize personally," I started. "I am listening." Richard took a deep breath, as if preparing for the most important moment of his life. "Mom, I was the worst person I could have been. I treated you like trash when you deserved worship. I chose status and money over true love. I kicked out the woman who gave me life, who sacrificed everything for me as if you were worth nothing." Tears began to stream down his face. And the cruelest thing is that I didn't realize how wrong I was until I lost everything, until I was on the other side, feeling the cold, the loneliness, the abandonment. It was only then that I understood what I had done to you. He wiped his tears with his shirt sleeve. This last year was hell, but it was a necessary hell. I needed to hit rock bottom to look up and see how far I had fallen. I started therapy, Mom, real therapy, and I discovered things about myself that are hard to accept. I discovered I was always insecure. I always felt inferior, and I used you as a scapegoat to feel better. "And Ashley?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "She was with me for the money," he said bitterly. The second we lost everything she left. She is married now to an older businessman. Bertha disappeared too. I found out she was siphoning money from us. Ironically, we were all parasites feeding off each other. He looked me in the eye. I am not asking to come back. I don't expect you to support me or help me financially. I am working, paying my bills, building a life on my own. It is far from glamorous, but it is honest. And for the first time in my life, I am proud of myself, not for what I have, but for who I am trying to be. Why tell me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know that your sacrifices were not completely in vain, he replied. Yes, I was a monster for a long time, but deep down somewhere, the lessons you tried to teach me were still there, and they are starting to bloom now, even if it is too late. I stayed silent, processing his words. Part of me wanted to believe. Part of me was still too hurt. Richard, I said finally, I heard you, and I recognize you are trying to change. But forgiveness. Forgiveness is not something I can give just like that because you asked nicely. I know, he said quickly. I don't expect that. Let me finish, I continued. Forgiveness is a process. And honestly, I don't know if I will ever be able to completely forgive what you did that night. That night destroyed me in ways you will never fully understand. He bowed his head, ashamed. But I went on. I am willing to consider reconnecting, slowly, with clear boundaries. If you really changed, you are going to prove it with actions, not words, and that is going to take time. Years, maybe. He looked up and there was hope in his eyes for the first time. I accept any condition, any rule. I just want a chance to have my mother back, even if it is just as an acquaintance at first. Family therapy, I said. You, me, and a professional therapist. If we are going to try to rebuild something, it has to be the right way. Yes, absolutely yes. He accepted immediately. And you need to understand that I am no longer that woman you could manipulate or belittle. I changed. I grew. I have my own life now, my own goals. I am not going back. I don't want you to go back. He said sincerely, you are incredible, powerful. You are who you should have always been if I hadn't held you back. I sighed. So let's try, slowly. But Richard, at the first sign that you are returning to old patterns, I disappear. Definitely. Understood. Understood. And I won't disappoint you again. I promise. We ended the meeting with a handshake. Not a hug. Not yet. But a firm handshake that sealed a new beginning. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time. I didn't know if I had done the right thing, but I knew I had done my thing. On my terms, and that made all the difference. The following months were strange. Richard and I started meeting regularly, always in family therapy sessions first, and eventually for short, intense coffees. He kept his word. He didn't ask for money. He didn't try to get close to my mother to get favors. He simply showed up. He talked. He shared about his life. He listened about mine. And slowly, very slowly, I started to see the boy I had raised emerge from the terrible man he had transformed into. Not completely, not yet, but there were sparks of him there. In one of the therapy sessions, months after reuniting, he said something that marked me. Do you know what the most ironic thing about all this is? He was looking at his hands while he spoke. I spent so much time trying to be rich and important that I lost the only thing that really mattered. You. When I had you, I had everything, but I was young and stupid to realize. The therapist watched us attentively. Sarah, she addressed me. How do you feel hearing this sad? I admitted. Sad because it is true, but also relieved because I am no longer that person who needs to be needed to feel valuable. I have value for myself now. And do you need her now? The therapist asked Richard, not in the way I needed her before he replied carefully, before I needed her to serve me to validate my ego to be my emotional punching bag. Now I just want her in my life because she is my mother, because she loves me unconditionally even when I didn't deserve it, and because I finally learned to love her back the right way. I looked at him searching for signs of manipulation or falsehood, but all I saw was raw and painful sincerity. "You are doing well," said the therapist, looking at both of us. "This journey is not linear. There will be setbacks, difficult moments, but you are doing the work, both of you." After that session, Richard asked if we could talk a little more. We went to a nearby cafe. "Can I ask you something?" he said nervously, moving the coffee cup. "Sure." "Are you happy?" "Really?" The question took me by surprise. I thought about it for a moment. "Yes," I replied, and realized it was true. I am. For the first time in decades, I wake up excited. I have purpose. I have challenges that stimulate me. I have people who respect me. I have a mother who loves me and supports me, and I am learning to love myself too. Richard smiled, but there was sadness in the smile. "I am glad. Truly. You deserve all this and more. And you," I asked, "are you happy?" "I am at peace," he said slowly. "I don't know if it is happiness yet, but I am no longer that miserable man who pretended to have it all. I have less now materially, but I feel richer inside." We stayed in silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. "Mom," he said suddenly, "I never asked you. Why did Grandma do that? Why did she wait so long? She could have intervened years earlier." I thought about the conversation I had with my mother about that. "Because she was letting me live my own life," I explained. "Letting me make my choices even when they were bad. Letting me learn my own lessons. She only intervened when the situation became dangerous for my health and safety." "She loves you a lot," observed Richard. "She does. And she is teaching me so much about business, about life, about strength. She is incredible." Do you think he hesitated? Do you think someday she will forgive me, or at least tolerate me? I laughed humorlessly. My mother is not one to forgive easily. She is more protective of me than I am. It is going to take a long, long time, and maybe it will never happen completely. You will have to accept that. He nodded, seeming resigned. I accept it. It is the least I deserve. More time passed. 6 months of therapy turned into a year. The meetings became less tense, more natural. We started laughing together sometimes, remembering good memories from his childhood, and there were some in the middle of it all. One day, Richard showed up with a new girlfriend. She was an elementary school teacher. Simple, gentle, genuine. When she looked at him, there was real love there. Not interest, not greed, just true affection. And when he looked at her, I saw a version of him I didn't know. Attentive, respectful, humble. "She is special," he told me later when we were alone. "She knows nothing about who I was. She only knows who I am now, and she loves me for myself." "Then don't mess it up," I warned, half joking, half serious. "Never," he promised. I learned my lesson the hard way. It was during this period that something unexpected happened. My company was negotiating a big merger with another company. It was complicated, full of legal and financial details. During one of the meetings, I discovered that the CEO of the other company was Ashley's ex-husband, the rich man she had married after abandoning Richard. He recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Sanders," he said with a nervous smile. "What a small world, Mr. Augustus," I replied professionally. "Let's keep things strictly business, shall we?" Of course, he accepted quickly, but after the meeting he asked to speak in private. "I need to tell you something," he said, looking uncomfortable. "About Ashley. I have no interest in gossip about my ex-daughter-in-law," I replied coldly. "It is not gossip, it is a warning. She is trying to sue Richard. She claims he hid assets in their divorce, which is ridiculous, because he had nothing. But she is desperate. Our marriage ended, she spent all the money I gave her, and now she is trying to get blood from a stone." I looked at him carefully. "Why tell me this?" He sighed. Because I was an idiot too. I married her for the pretty face and for the connection I thought I had. I found out fast she is a leech, and when I found out her ex-husband was Mrs. Margaret Sanders' son, he paused. Well, I realized I got involved with the wrong family. Richard is at least trying to be better. Ashley is only getting worse. I thanked him for the information and immediately called Richard to warn him. He already knew about the lawsuit and had a cheap lawyer dealing with it. Let me help you. I offered, surprising myself. Mom, no. You already did. Not for you, I interrupted. For me. Because I refuse to let that woman continue to be a problem in our lives. I am going to put my lawyers on this, the best ones, and we are going to end this charade once and for all. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, with a choked voice, "Thank you, Mom, thank you so much. You are welcome. Now go to work and stop worrying about that." The lawsuit was quickly crushed. My mother's lawyers not only proved that Richard had no hidden assets, but also presented evidence that Ashley had falsified documents to support her allegations. She ended up having to pay a heavy fine and was almost criminally prosecuted for fraud. The last I heard of her was that she had moved to another state with a destroyed reputation. Karma had done its full work. 2 years after that rainy night, my life was unrecognizable. I was CEO of not just one, but 3 companies in my mother's group. I had a team of executives who genuinely respected me. I participated in conferences, gave interviews, was consulted on important decisions. More importantly, I was happy, truly deeply happy. Richard was rebuilding his life at his own pace. He married the teacher, a simple and beautiful ceremony. I attended. My mother didn't. There was still a lot of resentment there, and I respected that. But I went and I cried tears of genuine joy watching him say, "I do," to a woman who truly loved him. They had a baby a few months later, a girl. Richard called me from the hospital, emotional. "Mom, you have a granddaughter, and I want to do it right this time. I want her to have the grandmother I had." The incredible, loving grandmother who sacrificed everything. And I am going to love her, I promised. But on my terms, in my time. I am not going to let her use me like you used me. Never, he promised solemnly. I am going to teach her about you, about sacrifice, about true love, about strength. She is going to know what kind of incredible woman her grandmother is. When I held my granddaughter for the first time, something in me healed. Not completely. Some scars are permanent, but a little. Enough for me to look at that little baby and feel hope instead of fear. My mother also eventually softened, at least in relation to the child. "I am not going to punish an innocent baby for the sins of the father," she said pragmatically. But Richard still has a lot to prove, and he was proving it. Slowly, consistently, not with grand gestures or empty promises, but with small daily actions, regular calls to ask how I was, respectful visits that didn't exceed the agreed time, genuine gratitude for anything I did. One Sunday afternoon, almost 3 years after that night, we were all gathered at the mansion. Me, my mother, Richard, his wife, and the baby. It was strange and wonderful at the same time. Richard was in the garden playing with his daughter when my mother made an observation. "He changed," she said, almost reluctant to admit. For real this time. He changed, I agreed, but I changed too. And I am not going to forget what happened. "Nor should you," she said firmly. "Forgiving isn't forgetting. It is deciding not to let the past control your future." I looked at my mother. That incredible woman who had saved me, had transformed me, had given me a second chance at life. "Thank you," I said with tears in my eyes, "for everything." She hugged me. "You don't have to thank me. You are my daughter. I would do it 1,000 times." That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my room. The same luxurious room where I had slept for the first time 3 years ago. Soaked, broken, lost. I picked up the journal I started writing back then. I reread some entries from the first few days, the pain, the confusion, the rage, and then the more recent entries, the growing strength, the small and big victories, the rebuilding. I wrote a new entry. Today I realized I am no longer the woman who was kicked out into the rain. That woman died that night. What was born in her place was someone stronger, wiser, more complete. I don't wish what I went through on anyone. The pain was immense, almost unbearable, but it was also transformative. I learned that you can love someone and still set boundaries. That sacrifice is not synonymous with martyrdom, that you can forgive without forgetting, that you can start over no matter your age. Richard is still in my heart, but he is no longer the center of it. The center is me now, and that makes all the difference. My mother gave me back my life, but I was the one who decided what to do with it, and I chose to build something beautiful, something strong, something mine. The revenge my mother executed that night wasn't just about destroying those who hurt me. It was about giving me the tools to rebuild myself, and I used every one of them. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a CEO, a businesswoman, a powerful woman, but more importantly, I see someone who respects herself, who knows her worth, who will never again allow herself to be treated as less than extraordinary, because that was exactly what I always was. I just needed a storm to wash away the illusion and reveal the truth. I closed the journal and looked out the window. Outside, the sky was clear, full of stars. There was no storm in sight. And finally, I was in peace. The word my mother said that night, destroy, wasn't just about demolishing a house or a social status. It was about destroying a version of me that accepted crumbs, that believed suffering was love, that confused sacrifice with self-destruction. That version needed to be destroyed so this new version could be born. And I was born. From the ashes, from the rain, from the pain. I was reborn, and now I was finally living. For real. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe, and tell me in the comments which part left you with your mouth open. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I will see you there.